Hello guys. Let's look at support and movement in mammals today. And this support and movement in mammals, it is enabled by bones and muscles which work together to bring about support and movement. And in our previous lesson, we talked about the skeleton found in mammals, which is endoskeleton. And the endoskeleton is divided into the axial skeleton here and the appendicular skeleton. And basically, this axial skeleton consists of the middle part or the middle parts of the skeleton or of the endoskeleton, and that is the skull here. We have the skull, then we have the sternum here. This is the sternum. Then apart from sternum, the axial skeleton contains vertebral column. The vertebral column consists of bones which are small. We call them vertebrae, that is plural, and vertebra if it is one. Then basically appendicular skeleton consists of pectoral girdles, and the pectoral girdles consists of clavicle here and the scapula plus the coracoid process, which is not shown. Then limbs attached to the pectoral girdles, that is the forelimb, which include the humerus, the radius, and the ulna, plus carpals, metacarpals here, and phalanges. Then while pelvic girdle consists of the ilium, ischium, we have the ischium here, and the sacrum, and we have hind limbs which are attached onto the pelvic girdle, and that is the femur here. Then we have patella, tibia, fibula, the tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. The tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. Then let's move to inner details of the axial skeleton. And the axial skeleton consists of the skull, as we talked about, the sternum, ribcage, vertebral column. Let's look at the skull. And the skull, basically, it is made up of many bones joined together to form what we call a cranium. And this is our cranium here. We have our cranium here, as you are seeing. This is the cranium. All of this is cranium. We are saying it is made up of many bones joined together. You can see here we have the frontal bone, the parietal bone here, the temporal bone, and these bones fuse together, and the point of fusion we call sutures. The sutures, for example, is found here, where these bones fuse, and we have a fixed joint which we refer to as sutures, which allows passage of blood vessels and nerves. Then the cranium encloses the brain and protects it from mechanical damage. Then this cranium also has perforations that allow blood vessels and nerves to pass to and from the brain. Then the facial skeleton consists of the upper and lower jaws. We have the upper jaw here, we call it maxilla. Then the lower jaw, we call it the mandible. And the lower jaw articulates to the cranium with a movable joint. It articulates to the cranium with a movable joint. We have this lower jaw here. We have, we have this lower jaw here, we call the mandible, and the point of articulation is here with the cranium. And this enables chewing of food. This enables chewing of food because a joint is formed which is movable, that allows chewing of food. Then at the posterior end, basically means behind or the lower end of the cranium there are occipital condyles, and the occipital condyles articulate with the atlas vertebra to form a joint that allows nodding of the head. And these occipital condyles on the cranium, basically the projections, two projections, which are able to articulate with the first cervical vertebra we call atlas, that allows formation of a pivot joint, which allows nodding of the head or upward and downward movement of the head. Then next we have ribcage and sternum, and they enclose the thoracic cavity, and the ribs have cartilage at point where they articulate, and the sternum, basically it is bony to support organs in the thoracic cavity. And this sternum here, as you can see, let me use a red. As you can see, the sternum here, or in our diagram here, the sternum is made up of small bones called vertebrae, and we are saying it is bony, it is rigid to support organs in the thoracic cavity. Then at the lower end of the ribcage and sternum, surface area is provided for attachment of back and abdominal muscles. Let's move on. The vertebral column. And initially we said the vertebral column consists of bones called vertebrae. This is a plural, and in case it is singular or one small bone, it is vertebra without an E. And the column is a system of bones running from the neck region to the tail region, as shown here from this first bone in the neck region, which is the atlas vertebra, and it is a type of cervical vertebra, and runs up to the last vertebrae here called caudal vertebra, which is fused to form the coccyx. And these vertebrae are separated from each other by a cartilage we call intervertebral discs. And the functions of intervertebral discs: first, they absorb shock, then they also reduce friction between vertebrae. We don't use prevent because you cannot prevent friction. They reduce friction. Then they make the vertebral column flexible by allowing for some movement between the vertebrae. Those are the roles of the intervertebral discs. And back to our vertebral column, just a preview. The first 7 vertebrae, we call them cervical vertebrae, and the first one is called atlas vertebrae, second one axis vertebrae, the other 5 are called cervical vertebrae. Then the next type of vertebrae we have thoracic vertebrae, found at the thoracic region, and there are 12 in number. Then we have lumbar vertebrae, there are 5 in number, just below the thoracic region, where we have the lumbar region or the lumbar region. Then after that we have sacral vertebra here, and they fuse to form a bone called sacral. The last vertebrae is called caudal vertebrae, which is fused to form a coccyx. In evolution, we refer to it as vestigial tail, because it is a vestigial structure in human beings. Then on to the next bit. Let's distinguish features of all vertebrae, and they have some features. The first feature is a neural canal here, the neural canal, and this neural canal, it is just an opening which allows passage of spinal cord, and it is located basically at the center of each vertebrae. Then we have the centrum here, as you can see, and the centrum supports the body weight, and apart from that, it protects the spinal cord. Then we have a neural spine here, which is just a projection which increases surface area for attachment of muscles. Then the neural arc here, it looks like an arc, and the neural arc is for protection of spinal cord. Then As you can see, lateral here, lateral to the centrum, we have two projections called transverse processes, and their function is to increase surface area for attachment of muscles. That was just a preview. Let's look at the inner details of the parts of a vertebrae. As I said, the centrum here is a strong solid piece of bone which fits into the intervertebral discs of both sides, and the role is to support and withstand compression, and it also protects the spinal cord and for attachment of transverse process. And we said the transverse process projects laterally from the centrum. As you can see here, we have the transverse process projecting laterally from this centrum. Then neural canal, it is a centrally running opening and allows passage of spinal cord. Let's have a look. This is our neural canal here, found at the center for passage of spinal cord. Then we have neural arc, and it is just an arc of bones arising from the centrum and protects the spinal cord from mechanical damage. Then the transverse process, there are lateral projections, and when you say lateral projections, we mean sideways. There are side projections from the centrum, as you can see, from the sides. These are the transverse process, and their role is to provide large surface area for muscle attachment. The key is a provision of surface area for muscle attachment. Remember, we have very many muscles in our body, and those muscles must be attached to the bones. Next, we have neurospine, and it is just a dorsal projection from the centrum that is centrally located, and it provides surface for attachment of muscles. Let's preview that neurospine. You can see it is at the center and dorsally located from this centrum. Then next we have zygapophysis, and the special process that occur in pairs and are located above the centrum on either sides. The anterior in layman's language, you say from the front, the anterior pair form pre-zygapophysis, where the posterior and the back end pair forms the post-zygapophysis. And each of these have a smooth facets. Facet is like a surface for articulation with adjacent vertebra. And the functions of zygapophysis are, they have facets for articulation to allow movement between vertebrae. Let's go back and look at the facets. The facets we are talking here, we have it here. Then another one is here. Those are the facets or surfaces for articulation with adjacent vertebra. Then they have bases for muscle attachment. Let's look at the types of vertebrae, and the first one we have cervical vertebrae, followed by thoracic vertebrae, then lumbar vertebrae, sacral vertebrae, and the caudal vertebrae. Remember, there are 5 in number, and in that order. Let's look at the first vertebrae, that is the cervical vertebrae, and it is found in the neck region. And the distinguishing features of cervical vertebrae, the first one, they have a short neurospine, then they have vertebraterial canals, and these vertebraterial canals allow passage of neck blood vessels and nerves. Then they have branched or divided transverse processes, and they have cervical ribs. Those are the unique or distinguishing features of cervical vertebrae. You can, when given a vertebrae, can be able to say this is a cervical vertebrae because of those unique features which are only found in cervical vertebrae. Let's look at the adaptations of cervical vertebrae to its functions. Has a pre-zygapophysis and post-zygapophysis for articulation with adjacent vertebrae, we had talked about. Then presence of neural canal. A neural canal is for passage of spinal cord. The neural spine, we say this is short for attachment of muscles. Then facets for articulation with other vertebrae. Then vertebraterial canals for passage of blood vessels and nerves. Then the neural arc and centrum for protection of spinal cord. Then basically in human beings we have 7 cervical vertebrae. The first 2 from the skull are specialized for specific functions. The first one, we call it atlas vertebrae, and the second one we call it axis vertebrae. And in this case, the atlas vertebrae, we said it articulates with the occipital condyles, the occipital condyles of the skull, to form a pivot joint which allows nodding of the head. Let's look at the atlas vertebrae in details. It is the first cervical vertebra, articulates with the occipital condyles, as we have said, of the skull, to form a pivot joint which allows nodding of the head or up and down movement of the head. Let's look at the characteristics of the atlas. Number 1, absence or reduced centrum. As you can see here, it lacks the centrum. Then wide neural canal. As you can see, this is the neural canal here. It is wide for passage of spinal cord. Then short neural spine and wing-like transverse process. We have this is the wing-like transverse process for provision of surface for muscle attachment. It's wing-like, as you can see. Then wide articulating facets. We have this is the wide articulating facets. Wide articulating facets for articulation with the base of the skull. Then the functions: supports the head and allows nodding movement with the skull, provides large surface area for attachment of muscles. You can have other views. You can see the transverse process wing-like to provide a large surface area for attachment of muscles. Then wide articulating facets which articulate with the base of the skull. Then another view, we have the vertebral canals here. For example, these 2 are vertebral canals which allow passage of nerves and blood vessels. Then the vertebraterial canal is also here for passage of blood vessels and nerves. Transverse process here, as you can see, they are wing-like. They are wing-like to increase surface area for attachment of muscles. Then a reduced neural spine here for attachment of muscles. Then at the center we have neural canal for passage of spinal cord. Structures that fit in the neural canal of the atlas. Number 1, we have spinal cord, then odontoid process. And this odontoid process is from the axis. Let's look at the axis vertebra. It is the second cervical vertebra next to the atlas, then articulates with the atlas to form a pivot joint which allows rotational movement of the head. Let's look at the characteristics. It has a wide neural canal, and we said earlier on we have this is the canal which allows passage of spinal cord. Then it has a wing-like transverse process here which provides surface for muscle attachment. Then a broad neural spine. A broad neural spine is here the broad neurospine is here, and the broad neurospine is for attachment of neck muscles. Then the centrum extends to form an odontoid process. This is very important for you to know or to note. It forms an odontoid process, and the odontoid process here, as you can see the projection also here, and this fits into the neural canal of the axis, of the atlas, to allow rotational movement of the head. As we said earlier, structures that fit in the neural canal of the atlas, we have odontoid process, and in this case, in this one, we are talking about the centrum extending to form an odontoid process, which is peg-like and fits into the neural canal of the atlas to allow rotational movement of the head. Functions of the axis of vertebra allows rotational movement of the head, then provides base for muscle attachment. Differences between atlas and axis. Number one, atlas lacks a centrum, axis has a centrum. Atlas has a reduced neurospine, axis has a broad neurospine. Then atlas lacks odontoid process, axis has an odontoid process. Then atlas has a broad transverse process, while axis has a small transverse process. Then atlas allows nodding movement of the head, while axis allows rotational movement of the head. Other diagrams to show the atlas and axis. You can see this is the atlas, the first cervical vertebra, then the axis, which is the second cervical vertebra. Then we have the atlas here is our atlas. As you can see, the characteristics we said, wide neural canal here for passage of spinal cord. Then we have these two canals here and here, call them vertebral canals for passage of nerves and blood vessels. Then you can see wide articulating facets here for articulation with the base of the skull. Then we have a neurospine here, which is so much reduced, but it is for attachment of muscles. Then you can also see the other view here, the transverse process here, which is a wing-like to increase surface area for attachment of muscles. Then we said this neural canal, it is wide to allow passage of spinal cord and also for the odontoid process to fit in. This is the odontoid process here, fits in the neural canal of the atlas. Let's look at the axis. We have the centrum projecting to form odontoid process here. Then we have the neurospine here to increase surface area for muscle attachment. Then neural canal here for passage of spinal cord. The transverse process, which are wing-like, for attachment of muscles. Then we have the canals here, vertebral canals, for passage of nerves and blood vessels. Then we said earlier on, this odontoid process fits into the odontoid process here, fits into this neural canal of the atlas to allow rotational movements of the head. Next, let's look at similarities between axis and atlas. Both have a neurospine, a neural canal, a transverse process, vertebral canals, and articular facets. And that is for articulation with adjacent vertebrae. Then the other 5 cervical vertebrae, we call them typical cervical vertebrae. They are unspecialized, and they constitute the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th cervical vertebra in human beings. Let's look at the characteristics. Number 1, branched transverse processes. Short neurospine, have vertebral canals, and they have cervical ribs. Let's look at the branched transverse process, and we have the branch transverse process here, as you can see, here and here. And the branch transverse process increases surface area for muscle attachment. Then short neurospine here, and it is for attachment of muscles. Vertebral canals, you can see them here. There are two here for passage of nerves and blood vessels. Then a presence of cervical ribs, which help to of attachment of muscles. Another view we have here, this is a neurospine for attachment of muscles. Neurocanal here for passage of spinal cord. Vertebral canal here and here for passage of nerves and blood vessels. Then here we have articulating surfaces or facets at the pre-zygapophysis for articulation with adjacent vertebrae. Then we have centrum here. The centrum, we said the purpose is to support the body weight and also protect spinal cord. Then we have the transverse process here, which are branched for provision of surface for muscle attachment. Next, vertebrae, we call it thoracic vertebrae, and found in the chest region. And there are 12 thoracic vertebrae in humans. You can look at the diagram. Thoracic vertebrae here and here. Let's look at the characteristics. It has a long neurospine, and a long neurospine increases surface area for attachment of muscles. We have the long neurospine here. This is the long neurospine, as you can see. So in this other version, the long neurospine. Then has a large centrum to protect the spinal cord. We have the centrum here for protection of spinal cord. Short transverse processes. We have the short transverse process here, and here, which provides surface for muscle attachment. And one thing you need to know about the transverse process of thoracic vertebrae, they have what you call facets, called tubercular facets. And the tubercular facets, example, it is here, and on this diagram we have it here, the tubercular facets, and it is for articulation with tuberculum of the rib. Then centrum, the centrum here has capitular facets for articulation with capitulum of the rib. Remember, the rib articulates with thoracic vertebrae at the back, and at the front articulates with the sternum. And at the back, where it articulates with the thoracic vertebrae, it articulates with the thoracic vertebrae at the tubercular facets, which articulate with tuberculum of ribs. Then capitular facets, which articulate with the capitulum of the ribs. Then has a small neural arc, then pre-zygapophysis and post-zygapophysis for articulating with adjacent vertebra. Let's look at the rib. And the rib articulates with the thoracic vertebrae at the back, just as we have said, at the back. Then at the front, it articulates with the sternum. Then adaptation of the rib to its function, the shaft is curved to increase volume in thoracic cavity. This is the shaft, which is curved. Then shaft is long, as you can see, the shaft is long here to increase surface area for attachment of muscles. Then the rib is ossified to protect organs in the thoracic cavity. And you can look at our rib here, the part of the rib. We have tuberculum, capitulum. And I've said tuberculum here articulates with tubercular facets on the thoracic vertebrae. Then the capitulum here articulates with the capitular facets found on the thoracic vertebrae. Then the rib at the front articulates with sternum. At the point of articulation, you have cartilage here to reduce friction. Difference between cervical and thoracic vertebrae. Cervical vertebrae, they have vertebratal canals, which we said for passage of nerves and blood vessels. Then thoracic, they lack vertebratal canals. Then cervical vertebrae have reduced neurospine, while the thoracic vertebrae have a long neurospine, and that is for attachment of back muscles. Cervical vertebrae has a branched transverse process, while thoracic vertebrae, the transverse process are not branched, instead they are short and not branched. Then cervical vertebrae lack capitular and tubercular facets, while thoracic vertebrae has capitular facets for articulation with capitulum of the rib, and the tubercular facets for articulation of tuberculum of the rib. Let's look at the lumbar vertebrae, and they are found in the lumbar region, or the lumbar region of the body. There are 5 in number in human beings. The distinguishing features: number 1, large centrum to offer support, and this is the large centrum here we are seeing. Also, you can use this diagram. This is the large centrum to provide support and also to protect spinal cord from damage. Then long and broad. The keywords: it is long and broad transverse processes. As you can see, the transverse process here, which is long. Then you can see the transverse process here, which is also long and broad to provide surface for muscle attachment. Then a wide neural spine. We have a neural spine here. Wide neural spine for provision of attachment of muscles. Then presence of metapophysis, and metapophysis and anapophysis, they are just extra projections found in the lumbar vertebrae in some animals to increase surface area for attachment of muscles. And this metapophysis, you can see there are 2 in number, just besides the neurospine for attachment of muscles. Then hyper and anapophysis. Hyperpophysis found here for attachment of muscles. Functions of lumbar vertebrae: number 1, support to the heavy weight of abdominal region, then provide surfaces for attachment of muscles. Differences between cervical and lumbar vertebrae. Cervical vertebrae has vertebratal canals, while lumbar vertebra lacks vertebratal canals. Then cervical has branched transverse process, while lumbar vertebrae has transverse process but are not branched. Then cervical vertebrae has a small neurospine. Lumbar has a large neurospine. Cervical has cervical ribs, while lumbar lacks cervical ribs. Cervical vertebrae lacks metapophysis and anapophysis, while lumbar vertebrae has metapophysis and anapophysis. And you said they're just extra projections for attachment of muscles. Let's look at the differences between thoracic vertebrae and lumbar vertebrae. Thoracic vertebrae, they have a long neurospine, but the lumbar has short neurospine. Thoracic vertebrae has a short transverse process, while lumbar has a long transverse process. Thoracic vertebrae has a smaller centrum, while lumbar has a larger centrum. The thoracic has capitular and tubercular facets. We said capitular articulates with capitulum of the rib. It is found on the central, while tubercular facets articulate with tuberculum of the ribs, and it is found in the transverse process. On the other hand, the lumbar vertebrae lacks capitular and tubercular facets. The next vertebra, we have sacral vertebra, and it is found in the sacral region. And there are 5 sacral vertebrae. And these sacral vertebrae, they fuse to form a rigid structure called sacrum. And sacrum, it is rigid to bear the body weight and spread it to the legs through the pelvic girdle. Remember I said the pelvic girdle is under appendicular skeleton and has bones attached to it, the bones of the hind limb. Let's look at the characteristics of sacral vertebra. They have a large and broad centrum to offer support. Then they have a narrow neural canal. We said the neural canal is for passage of spinal cord. Then anterior sacral vertebrae are fused to form sacrum, which provides strength and transmits weight of the stationary animal to the rest of the body. Then the sacrum has a large base and short neural spine. As you can see, they have also wing-like transverse process for attachment of muscles. Then you can see the neural spines here, the fused vertebrae. Then the neural canal is just above here for passage of spinal cord. Then it has a sacral foramens or sacral canals for passage of blood vessels and nerves. Then caudal vertebrae, that is the last vertebrae in human beings, it forms the tail. And the number of caudal vertebrae on an animal depends on the length of the tail. It means the longer the tail, the more the number of caudal vertebrae. In human beings, we have 4 caudal vertebrae, which are fused to form coccyx. The neural spine and zygapophyse are greatly reduced, and the neural canal and neural arc are absent. Hence, the entire bone is essentially a centrum. Although that has been the types of vertebrae and their characteristics. You can look at a revision question. Types of skeleton found in multicellular organisms. We have the endoskeleton, which is found basically in mammals. Then exoskeleton, found in members of phylum Arthropoda, where you have shading of that exoskeleton to allow growth. Then endostatic skeleton, which is found in mainly the earthworms or worms, which have water in their body. They describe how cervical, lumbar, and sacral vertebrae are suited to their function. Cervical vertebrae have vertebral canals to allow passage of vertebral artery or blood vessels and nerves. Then atlas has broad surfaces for articulation in the condyles of the skull to permit nodding of the head. Then the axis has odontoid process to permit rotational movement of the head and act as a pivot for atlas. Then presence of zygapophyses for articulation between vertebrae. Then short and broad transverse process for attachment of neck muscles. Then short neural spine for attachment of neck muscles. Wide neural canal for passage of spinal cord. Lumbar vertebrae, it has a broad neural spine, which we looked at it earlier on, for attachment of powerful back muscles. Then large and well-developed transverse process for muscle attachment, and if it is large, it means it increases surface area for attachment of muscles. Then has metapophyses and anapophyses to increase surface area for muscle attachment. Initially we said these are just extra projections found on the lumbar vertebrae. Then large centrum for support and protection of spinal cord. Then presence of zygapophyses for articulation with adjacent vertebrae. Then a sacral vertebra, anterior sacral vertebra has well-developed transverse processes which are fused with the pelvic girdle. Then the vertebrae are fused for strength and to transmit the weight of a stationary animal to the rest of the body. Then sacrum has a broad base for attachment of back muscles. Maybe we can add presence of sacral foramen for passage of nerves and blood vessels. That was the first bit about the axial skeleton. Thank you guys. And the second part, based on the appendicular skeleton, will come soon. Thank you for listening and watching. Please subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you.